The throne room of the Valkyrie Empire stretched for nearly a kilometer, its vaulted ceilings lost in artificial clouds that swirled with programmed lightning. Emperor Thulvex sat upon a seat carved from the compressed core of a dead star, watching holographic displays that showed the entirety of his domain. 3 spiral arms of the galaxy bent to his will. 217 species served under his banner, their worlds counted among the 10,000 planets that paid tribute to his throne. Today, his attention focused on a small blue dot at the edge of explored space. "Tell me again about these humans," Thulvex said. His voice carried the weight of absolute authority, the kind that came from 3 centuries of unbroken conquest. Grand Admiral Voronek stepped forward, his ceremonial armor clicking against the marble floor. The old warrior had personally led the subjugation of 40 species. He had never known defeat. "They are a young species, Divine Emperor, barely 300 years into space travel. Our intelligence suggests they control approximately 20 colony worlds, spread across a small region of the Outer Rim. Their military strength." Voronek waved his upper hand, and a display materialized showing technical readouts and ship schematics. "Modest at best, our probes have identified a defense fleet of roughly 40 vessels. Their largest ships are perhaps half the size of our standard cruisers. Ground forces appear to number round to million across all their worlds." Thulvex leaned forward on his throne, his eyes narrowed with interest. 2 million soldiers for 20 worlds? That seems remarkably thin. "They are a peaceful species, Divine Emperor. Our cultural analysts believe they have not fought a major war in nearly a century. They appear to have grown soft and complacent." Voronek allowed himself a thin smile. "They will make excellent workers once properly motivated." The Emperor considered this information. The Valkyrie Empire had grown fat on the labor of conquered peoples. Each new species brought fresh resources, new technologies to absorb, and most importantly, more bodies to fuel the ever-expanding war machine. Humans were reported to be resilient and adaptable. They would serve well in the mining colonies. How long would conquest take? With a demonstration fleet, perhaps 3 weeks to reach their homeworld, another week to secure surrender. They lacked the military infrastructure to mount any serious resistance. Voronek gestured at the strategic display. "I recommend 500 ships, enough to overwhelm their defenses while leaving our core territories protected." Thulvex nodded slowly. 500 ships was a fraction of his total fleet, but more than enough to crush a species that fielded only 40 vessels. It would be a statement of power, a reminder to the galaxy that the Valkyrie Empire continued to grow. "You have my authorization, Grand Admiral. Bring me their surrender." Voronek bowed deeply, his ceremonial cape sweeping the floor. "It shall be done, Divine Emperor." 3 weeks later, the Valkyrie demonstration fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of human space. 500 warships arranged themselves in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the dark purple coloring that had become synonymous with conquest across the galaxy. The first human world in their path was called New Brisbane. It was a mining colony of roughly 2 million inhabitants, perched on a rocky planet rich in rare metals. Long-range sensors showed only minimal orbital defenses, a handful of weapon platforms, perhaps a dozen ships in dock. Grand Admiral Voronek stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Divine Judgment, watching the planet grow larger on the main display. Around him, his bridge crew worked with practiced efficiency. They had done this many times before. "Signal the colony," Voronek commanded. "Standard subjugation protocol. They have 1 hour to surrender unconditionally or face orbital bombardment." The communications officer transmitted the message. For several minutes, there was no response. Voronek felt a flicker of annoyance. Some species tried to delay in hopes of organizing resistance. It never worked. Then his sensor officer spoke up, confusion evident in his voice. "Admiral, I'm detecting vessel launches from the planet's surface and orbital facilities. 12 ships total." 12? Voronek almost laughed. "They mean to fight us with 12 ships." "It appears so, Admiral. They are moving into an intercept formation on the main display." 12 small points of light detached from the planet and began accelerating toward the Valkyrie fleet. Voronek studied their formation with professional interest. It was actually quite good. The human ships positioned themselves to maximize their firing angles, while presenting minimal target profiles. Not that it would matter against 500 warships. "Destroy them," Voronek ordered. "Make it quick. We have a schedule to maintain." The leading edge of the Valkyrie fleet opened fire. Thousands of plasma bolts and missile salvos streaked across the void toward the tiny human formation. It should have been over in seconds. It was not. The human ships moved with surprising agility, weaving through the barrage with maneuvers that pushed the boundaries of what Voronek thought possible for vessels their size. They returned fire with weapons that punched well above their apparent weight class. One Valkyrie destroyer took a direct hit to its engine section and fell out of formation, trailing fire. "What?" Voronek leaned forward, genuinely surprised. "One of our destroyers." From ships that size, the battle continued. The humans fought like cornered animals, squeezing every possible advantage from their inferior position. They used the planet's gravity well to slingshot round attacks. They coordinated their fire with precision that suggested extensive training. They refused to die easily. In the end, mathematics prevailed. 12 ships could not defeat 500, no matter how skilled their crews. One by one, the human vessels were disabled or destroyed. But it took far longer than it should have. And when the surviving human ships finally retreated, jumping to faster-than-light speed with their wounded, the Valkyrie fleet had lost 6 destroyers and 2 cruisers, 8 ships, to 12 defenders. Voronek stared at the casualty reports with something he had not felt in decades: uncertainty. "Admiral," his intelligence officer said carefully, "I recommend we analyze these combat recordings before proceeding. The humans demonstrated capabilities we did not anticipate." "They were desperate," Voronek replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "Desperation can make any species fight harder." "Of course, Admiral." New Brisbane surrendered 3 hours later, its surface facilities secured by Valkyrie ground forces. The human colonists were herded into processing centers where they would be cataloged and assigned work duties. It was standard procedure, the same thing that had happened to 100 species before them. But as Voronek walked among the prisoners, he noticed something that bothered him. They did not look defeated. Frightened, yes. Angry, certainly. But beneath those emotions, he saw something else in their eyes, something that looked almost like anticipation. One human, an older male with gray hair and a weathered face, actually smiled at Voronek as he passed. "Something amusing?" Voronek demanded. The human shrugged. "Just thinking about how much trouble you're in. You are the conquered. Your world belongs to the Empire now." "This world?" The human glanced around at the mining facilities, the prefabricated buildings, the dusty landscape. "Sure, it's a mining colony. We've got maybe 2 million people here." He looked back at Voronek. "Do you know how many humans there are total?" Voronek did not answer. His intelligence reports suggested roughly 4 billion across all human worlds. A respectable number, but nothing compared to the trillions under Valkyrie control. "You'll find out," the human said. He was still smiling. "You'll all find out." Voronek had the man isolated for further interrogation, but the encounter stayed with him. As the fleet regrouped and prepared to continue its advance toward the human homeworld, he found himself reviewing the combat footage again and again. 12 ships had held against 500 for nearly 2 hours. Their weapons had been more powerful than expected. Their tactics had been exceptional, and they had retreated rather than fight to the death, preserving their crews and vessels. That last part troubled Voronek most of all. Species facing conquest usually fought with suicidal determination, knowing death was preferable to subjugation. The humans had fought hard but strategically. They had preserved their forces as if they knew they would need them later. Voronek dismissed the thought. Human space was small. Their military was tiny. Whatever tricks they had employed at New Brisbane would not save them from the full weight of the demonstration fleet. He gave the order to advance. The fleet moved deeper into human territory over the following days. At each colony, the pattern repeated. Small groups of human ships would appear, fight with unexpected effectiveness, and then withdraw before they could be destroyed. They targeted specific systems, engines, and weapons. They avoided killing blows when possible. They fought to delay, not to win. Voronek's losses mounted. 20 ships, 30, 40. The numbers were insignificant compared to his total force, but the trend worried him. His crews were growing nervous. They had expected easy conquest, not grinding attrition. Admiral, his intelligence officer reported after the 5th engagement. We have intercepted human communications. They refer to our opponents as the colonial militia. She answered every message personally. It took hours, but it was important. These were the people humanity had been waiting for. The forgotten. The sky above the Nexus station filled with ships. 800 Sindari warships dropped out, of faster-than-light travel in perfect formation, their weapons systems hot and their shields raised. It was the largest military display the station had ever witnessed, a show of force designed to remind the galaxy who held the real power. Ambassador Voroth stood on the command deck of his flagship, watching the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The human vessel had not moved from its position at the edge of the system. It hung there alone, a single point of light against the darkness. Impressive, perhaps, but no match for the combined might of the Sindari Armada. Open a channel to the Council station, he commanded. All frequencies. I want everyone to hear this. His communications officer complied, and Voroth's voice echoed through every speaker on the station and every ship in the system. This is Ambassador Voroth of the Sindari Empire. The humans have spread lies and slander against our people. They have attempted to divide the Council and undermine the stability that has kept this galaxy at peace for 5,000 years. We will not tolerate this aggression. He paused, letting the words sink in. The human vessel has 1 hour to surrender and submit to Sindari authority. If they refuse, we will have no choice but to treat them as hostile invaders and respond accordingly. This is not a threat. It is a promise. The channel closed. Voroth turned to his tactical officer. Deploy the fleet in attack formation. If they try to run, block their escape routes. I want them trapped. Yes, Ambassador. The Sindari ships began to move, spreading out across the system like a net closing around its prey. Their formation was precise and intimidating, the product of thousands of years of military tradition. They had crushed countless enemies with this very tactic. The humans would be no different. On the Council station, panic had given way to a strange kind of calm. There was nothing anyone could do now except wait and watch. The ambassadors gathered in the observation galleries, their eyes fixed on the tactical displays that showed the positions of every ship in the system. Kethan stood among them, his scales pale with fear. He had never witnessed a battle before. He had never even seen a military engagement larger than a training exercise. Now he was about to watch the most powerful fleet in the galaxy attack a single vessel, and he had no idea what would happen. Ambassador Kellis stood nearby, her crystalline form still and silent. She had said nothing since Voroth's ultimatum. There was nothing to say. The decision was out of their hands now. Look, someone said, pointing at the display. The human ship was moving, not retreating, as Voroth had predicted, not surrendering. It was moving forward, toward the Sindari fleet, accelerating steadily. And as it moved, something changed about its appearance. Panels along its hull began to open. Weapons systems that had been hidden beneath the armor emerged and extended, unfolding like the petals of a deadly flower. Point defense arrays, energy projectors, launch tubes for weapons that the Council's sensors could not even identify. The ship that had seemed merely large now revealed itself as something far more terrible. Ancestors preserve us, one of the ambassadors whispered. The transformation was not complete. As the human vessel approached the Sindari formation, it broadcast a signal, a single pulse of energy, aimed not at the station, but at something beyond the system entirely. And the darkness answered. They came from every direction, emerging from faster-than-light travel with the precision of a perfectly coordinated dance. Ships identical to the Prometheus Rising, their hulls scarred by ancient battles, their weapons arrays fully deployed. 10, 20, 50, 100. The count kept rising as more and more vessels appeared, filling the system with a fleet that dwarfed even the Sindari Armada. Voroth watched in horror as his tactical display updated. The numbers made no sense. It was impossible. No species could build so many ships of that size. No economy could support such a force, no population could crew them. But the humans had done it. They had built an armada in secret, hiding it in the dead spaces between stars. Waiting for this moment, "All ships, hold position," he commanded, his voice cracking. "Do not fire unless fired upon. Ambassador, they outnumber us 3-1, and their weapons are far superior to ours. If we engage, we will be destroyed. I know." Voroth closed his eyes. For the first time in his life, he understood what it felt like to be powerless, to face an enemy that could crush him without effort, that could end everything he had built with a single command. This was what the smaller species felt when they faced the Sindari. This was the fear he had inflicted on others for so long. Captain Vasquez's voice came over the open channel, calm and measured. "Ambassador Voroth, your fleet is surrounded. Your weapons cannot harm us. Your shields cannot protect you. If you choose to fight, you will lose everything. But we did not come here for war." "Then what do you want?" Voroth demanded. "We want you to choose. Peace or destruction. Reform or extinction. The Sindari have to paths before them. You can continue as you have. Oppressing the weak, silencing the truth, ruling through fear. If you choose that path, we will stop you. Not today, perhaps, not tomorrow. But we will dismantle your empire piece by piece until nothing remains." She paused. "Or you can change. You can accept that the old ways are ending. You can work with the Council to build something better, something that protects all species instead of just the powerful. If you choose that path, we will welcome you as partners and allies. You cannot dictate terms to the Sindari. We are not dictating. We are offering. The choice is yours." The channel fell silent. Voroth stood on his command deck, surrounded by the symbols of Sindari power, and realized that all of it meant nothing. His ships, his weapons, his empire, it was all built on sand. And the tide had finally come to wash it away. "Ambassador," his tactical officer said quietly, "what are your orders?" Voroth did not answer. He was staring at the tactical display, at the sea of red icons that represented the human fleet. Each of those ships was a death sentence waiting to be carried out. Each of them could destroy his flagship without slowing down. He had spent his entire life believing that power came from strength, that the strong ruled and the weak served. Now he understood that there was always someone stronger. "Stand down," he said finally. "All ships, power down weapons and hold position." "Ambassador, you heard me. We cannot win this fight. There is no point in dying for nothing." The order went out, and one by one, the Sindari ships lowered their weapons. The tension that had gripped the system began to ease. The battle that everyone had expected would not happen, at least not today, on the council station. The ambassadors watched in stunned silence. They had expected destruction, carnage, the death of thousands. Instead, they witnessed something none of them had ever seen before. The Sindari had surrendered, without a single shot being fired, without a single life being lost. Ambassador Callis was the first to speak. "Captain Vasquez, this council owes you a debt that we can never repay. You have shown us what true strength looks like. Not the strength to destroy, but the strength to offer mercy when victory is certain." Vasquez's voice came over the channel, warm but serious. "We did not come here for gratitude, Ambassador. We came because it was the right thing to do. The galaxy does not need another conqueror. It needs protectors, partners, friends. Humanity is prepared to be all of those things. If you will have us, the Council accepts," Kella said, and her voice carried a weight that went beyond words. "Let this day mark the beginning of a new era, an era of cooperation instead of competition, of justice instead of tyranny, of hope instead of fear." The vote was held an hour later. Reform passed by an overwhelming majority. Only the Sindari and their closest allies voted against, and their opposition no longer mattered. The old order had ended. The new one was just beginning. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy transformed. Trade routes were redrawn. Treaties were renegotiated. Species that had been oppressed for centuries found themselves free for the first time in their history. The human fleet remained in council space, not as conquerors, but as guardians, ensuring that the transition happened peacefully. Kethan was promoted. His work in detecting the human vessel had not gone unnoticed, and he found himself assigned to the newly formed Galactic Cooperation Initiative, a joint project between humanity and the Council to address the inequities of the old system. It was hard work, but meaningful. For the first time in his life, he felt like he was making a difference. On the day the Prometheus Rising finally departed, Kethan stood in the observation gallery and watched it go. The great ship turned away from the station and began its long journey home, followed by the rest of the human fleet. They had done what they came to do. Now it was time to let the galaxy find its own way. Before the last ship vanished into the darkness, a message arrived on Kethan's personal console. It was from Captain Vasquez. "Thank you for your courage. Thank you for speaking up when others stayed silent. The galaxy needs more people like you. Stay brave. We are not far." Kethan read the message 3 times, feeling a warmth spread through his chest. Then he saved it to his personal archive, knowing he would read it again. The alarms on the Divine Judgment screamed without pause. Every sensor on the ship was overwhelmed, trying to track contacts that multiplied faster than the computers could process them. Grand Admiral Vornik stood frozen at his command console, watching the tactical display fill with red markers until it became a solid crimson mass. "Report," he managed to say, though his voice sounded strange in his own ears. "How many ships?" His sensor officer's hands trembled as she worked her console. "Admiral, I cannot get an accurate count. The numbers keep increasing. Current estimate is..." She paused, checked her readings, and checked them again. "Over 3,000 vessels, Admiral, and more are arriving every minute." 3,000. Vornik's 400 ships suddenly seemed very small, very fragile, very alone. Where did they come from? His first officer was at his side, his face a mask of controlled panic. "Our intelligence said they had 40 ships. 40. Look at the hull markings," the sensor officer said. Her voice had taken on a distant quality, as if she were narrating her own nightmare. "They're not the same as the militia ships we fought before. Different class designations, different weapons configurations. These ships are older, much older." Vornik studied the tactical display more closely. His officer was right. The human vessels emerging from faster-than-light travel were different from anything they had encountered. They were larger. Their hulls bore scars of previous conflicts, patched and repaired, but still visible. Their weapon systems were heavier, more numerous, designed for a type of warfare the militia ships had never suggested. "Those are the reserves," Vornik said quietly. "The ships they put to sleep," as if to confirm his words. A communication signal cut through his bridge speakers. It was a human voice, calm and professional, speaking in perfect Valkyrie. "Valkyrie Fleet, this is Admiral Sarah Okonkwo of the United Earth Reserve Navy. You have entered human space with hostile intent and refused peaceful withdrawal. In accordance with Reserve Protocol 7, you are now classified as enemy combatants. Stand down your weapons and prepare to be escorted from our territory, or we will be forced to engage." Vornik stared at the communication console. The human was offering him a chance to retreat. After everything that had happened, after he had threatened to reduce their homeworld to ash. "Admiral," his first officer whispered urgently, "we should consider their offer. We are outnumbered nearly 10 to 1. The Emperor ordered conquest." Vornik's voice was hollow. "I cannot return in failure. With respect, Admiral. Returning in failure is better than not returning at all." The words hung in the air. Around the bridge, crew members exchanged frightened glances. None of them had ever faced odds like this. None of them had ever imagined they would. Vornik opened a channel. "Admiral Okonkwo, I am Grand Admiral Vornik of the Valkyrie Empire. Your display is impressive, but we both know those ships have been sitting in storage for decades. Old vessels with outdated systems and inexperienced crews. You cannot hope to match the firepower of a fully operational Valkyrie battle fleet." The response came quickly. "You're right that our reserve fleet has been in storage, but our ships were designed to sleep. Every vessel you're looking at was built with long-term preservation in mind. They've been maintained by rotating crews throughout the decades. Their systems have been upgraded during each maintenance cycle, and their crews," a pause, "our crews are veterans, Admiral. Men and women who fought in humanity's last war. and spent the years since training the next generation. They know exactly what they're doing. Then why sleep at all? Why not maintain a standing fleet? Because standing armies get used. They require enemies to justify their existence. They grow until they consume the society that created them. Okonkwo's voice carried a weight of hard-learned wisdom. We wanted peace, Admiral. We built these ships hoping we would never have to wake them. But we're not fools. Peace is not the same as weakness. And the sleeping giant still has claws. Vornik felt the trap closing around him. He had been so confident, so certain that a species with 40 ships could not possibly threaten the might of the Vel Carry Empire. He had ignored the warnings, dismissed the signs, and now he stood on the edge of destruction. But surrender was not in his nature. Surrender was not in Valkyrie nature. They were conquerors. They had ruled 3 spiral arms for millennia. They did not bend to upstart species who had only left their homeworld 3 centuries ago. Your numbers are impressive, Vornik said coldly, but you forget one thing. Even if you destroy my fleet, the Empire will send another and another. You cannot fight us forever. We don't want to fight you forever, Admiral. We don't want to fight you at all. That's what you refuse to understand. Okonkwo's voice hardened. But if you force us into war, we will end it, quickly, decisively, and in a way that ensures we never have to fight again. Is that a threat? It's a promise and a warning. The ships you see now are only the first wave. The Earth Reserve Fleet, 3,000 vessels, crewed by veterans and maintained for exactly this scenario. Okonkwo paused. What you haven't seen yet are the colonial reserves. Each of our 20 worlds maintains their own sleeping fleet. Each world has their own veterans waiting to be called. Do you want me to tell you the total numbers, Admiral? Do you want to know what you're really facing? Vornik did not answer. He found that he did not want to know. 17,000 ships, Okonkwo said anyway. 800 million trained personnel. Industrial capacity that can replace losses faster than you can inflict them. And the will to use every resource we have if you threaten our existence. Her voice softened slightly. We are offering you a chance to leave in peace. We are offering your empire a chance to pretend this never happened. Take the offer, Admiral. For your sake and for your crew's sake. Take the offer and go home. Vornik closed his eyes. 17,000 ships, 800 million soldiers. Numbers that dwarfed anything the Empire had committed to this expedition. Numbers that would give even Emperor Thulvex pause. But he had his orders. He had his pride. He had the weight of Valkyrie. History pressing down on him, demanding that he never show weakness to a lesser species. I will consult with my Emperor, he said finally. No hostile action will be taken until I receive his guidance. That's all we ask. We'll give you 6 hours. The channel closed. Vornik immediately opened a quantum link to the throne world, his hands shaking as he entered his authorization codes. Emperor Thulvex needed to know what they faced. He needed to understand that this campaign had become something far different than anyone had anticipated. The holographic image of the Emperor materialized on the bridge. Thulvex's face showed irritation at being disturbed, but his expression changed as Vornik transmitted the tactical data. This is impossible, the Emperor said. Our intelligence indicated a small military, a peaceful species. Their military was sleeping, Divine Emperor. Their entire civilization was a mask, designed to hide their true strength. Vornik's voice cracked slightly. They built this force after their last war, and then put it in storage. They wanted peace, so they made themselves appear peaceful. But the weapons were always there, waiting. Thulvex was silent for a long moment. His 4 eyes moved across the data, taking in the ship counts, the force projections, the industrial capacity estimates that human commanders had provided as proof of their claims. If these numbers are accurate, the Emperor said slowly, then direct conquest is not feasible. No, Divine Emperor, can we negotiate a tributary arrangement? Trade concessions in exchange for withdrawal. They offered protectorate terms before hostilities began. Limited oversight, resource tribute, military cooperation. Vornik hesitated. They may not offer such generous terms now. Then we will accept whatever terms they offer. Thulvex's voice was hard, but Vornik heard the pragmatism beneath it. The Emperor had not held power for centuries by being stupid. The Empire cannot afford a war against these numbers. Not with the Confederacy watching our borders for weakness. Not with a dozen subject species waiting for a chance to rebel. Understood, Divine Emperor. Negotiate the best arrangement you can, Admiral. Preserve the fleet. Return home. Thulvex paused. And make sure our intelligence services understand the magnitude of their failure. I want to know how we missed this. I want to know what else we might have missed. The connection terminated. Voronek stood alone on his bridge, surrounded by a crew that had expected conquest and now faced the reality of retreat. He opened a channel to the human fleet. Admiral Okonkwo, this is Grand Admiral Voronek. The Valkyrie Empire wishes to negotiate terms for withdrawal. The response came immediately, as if the humans had been waiting. We're ready to receive your delegation, Admiral. And for what it's worth, you're making the right choice. War would have destroyed both our peoples. Peace serves everyone better. Voronek did not respond. He simply began the process of organizing a diplomatic party, trying not to think about how close he had come to annihilation. Across the void, 3,000 human warships held position, their weapons ready but not firing. Behind them, the waking giant of human civilization continued to mobilize. Reserves pouring in from 20 worlds. Industrial capacity spinning up for a war that might not happen. Ambassador Chen watched the diplomatic proceedings from a communication station on Earth. She had warned them. She had tried to. Emperor Thulvex had not left his throne room in 3 days. The holographic displays that usually showed tribute schedules and military deployments now displayed something far more troubling. Intelligence reports about humanity. Real intelligence this time, gathered through urgent diplomatic channels and confessions from agents who had clearly failed in their duties. The Imperial Intelligence Director knelt before the throne, his ceremonial armor doing nothing to hide his terror. Director Vecnal had served the Empire for 2 centuries. He had never knelt so low before any being, including the Emperor himself. Explain, Thulvex said. His voice was quiet, which was far more dangerous than shouting. Explain how your entire department missed an 800 million strong military. Divine Emperor, the humans are masters of deception. Vecnal's voice trembled. Their entire society is structured to appear peaceful. The military facilities we identified as civilian shipyards actually were civilian shipyards. 90% of the time, they simply had the capability to convert instantly when needed. Continue. Their reserve system is unlike anything we have encountered. When a human completes military service, they return to civilian life but remain registered in the reserve database. They maintain training through what they call weekend drills and annual exercises. We dismiss these as recreational activities. Vecnal swallowed hard. We were wrong. Thulvex leaned forward on his throne. How long have they maintained this system? Since their last major interstellar conflict, approximately 80 Earth years ago. They fought a war against 3 species who had allied against them. The war lasted 6 years and resulted in the death of over 2 billion humans. Vecnal pulled up historical data on the nearest display. The humans won. They won completely. And then they did something unprecedented. What? They let their enemies go. They demanded no tribute. They took no slaves. They simply established borders and warned the defeated species never to threaten humanity again. Vecnal shook his head in obvious confusion. They could have built an empire to rival our own. They had the military strength. They had the industrial capacity. They chose not to. Thulvex studied the historical records. Images of human warships from 8 decades ago filled the display. They were smaller than the vessels his fleet had encountered, but there were so many of them. Thousands upon thousands, filling the void around devastated alien worlds, and after the war, they dismantled their offensive fleet, kept only patrol vessels and defensive platforms, put the rest into storage. Vecnal's voice carried a note of disbelief. They called it the Great Stand Down. Their military-industrial complex was deliberately reduced to peacetime levels. Veterans were encouraged to return to civilian careers. The entire civilization consciously chose to become peaceful, but they kept the capability to wage war, hidden in plain sight. Divine Emperor, the shipyards that build civilian transports can produce warships within weeks. The factories that manufacture consumer goods can switch to military production overnight. The veterans who work as teachers and farmers and merchants can report to duty within hours. Vecnal looked up at his emperor. They built a civilization that can transform from peaceful to warlike faster than any species we have ever encountered. And they did it because they were afraid. Afraid of what? Of themselves. Vecnal stood slowly, gesturing at the historical data. Their records are clear, Divine Emperor. The humans who fought the War of Three Empires became something terrible. Their commanders speak of atrocities committed in desperation, of weapons deployed that should never have been built, of rage that consumed entire fleets. He paused. They won the war, but they were horrified by what they had become. The great stand-down was not just demilitarization. It was penance. Thulvex sat in silence, processing this information. The Valkyrie had built their empire on conquest and domination. They viewed military strength as the highest virtue, weakness as the ultimate sin. The idea of a species deliberately choosing to appear weak was alien to everything he understood. "You are telling me," he said slowly, "that humanity is not a peaceful species pretending to be strong. They are a warrior species pretending to be peaceful." "Yes, Divine Emperor, and we nearly forced them to stop pretending." The weight of that statement hung in the throne room. Voronic's fleet had come within hours of attacking Earth, within hours of triggering whatever transformation the humans had buried inside themselves, within hours of facing not just sleeping ships and reserve soldiers, but a species that had deliberately chained its own nature because it feared what it could do. "What else do we know about their military capabilities?" Thulvex demanded. "Specific weapons, specific tactics. What would we have faced if they had fully mobilized?" Vecnal hesitated. "The information is incomplete, Divine Emperor. The humans are very careful about what they reveal, but we have gathered some data from their public historical records." He manipulated the display, bringing up images and specifications that made the throne room feel very cold. Their primary combat doctrine emphasizes something they call overwhelming force. When humans go to war, they do not seek balanced engagements. They seek absolute superiority at every point of contact. If they need 10 ships to win a battle, they send 50. If they need 1,000 soldiers to take a position, they send 10,000. Wasteful. Thulvex observed. Effective, Vecnal countered. Their historical records show victory rates exceeding 95%. Once full mobilization is achieved, they accept higher resource expenditure in exchange for rapid, decisive outcomes. He pulled up another set of data. Their weapons technology is also concerning. They possess planet crackers capable of destroying entire worlds. They developed these weapons during the War of Three Empires and have maintained them in storage ever since. They can destroy planets, and they chose not to use this capability for conquest. They used it once, against a species called the Kethri who had attacked human colony worlds without warning. Vecnal's voice dropped. The Kethri homeworld no longer exists. There's an asteroid field where it used to be. The humans left a single beacon there, transmitting in every known language. What does it say? "We do not seek war. We will not tolerate genocide. This is the consequence of forcing us to fight." Vecnal met his emperor's eyes. The remaining Kethri were offered resettlement on human worlds. Many accepted. They now live peacefully among their former enemies. Thulvex absorbed this information in silence. The Valkyrie Empire had subjugated species through fear and force. They had never encountered a species that combined such overwhelming destructive capability with such deliberate restraint. The combination was more terrifying than pure aggression would have been. "What of their current mobilization?" the Emperor asked. "How much of their reserve strength has been activated?" "Approximately 15%, Divine Emperor. The Earth Reserve Fleet and initial colonial forces. They have not yet begun full industrial conversion or activated their deep reserves." Vecnal paused. "Our analysts believe this is deliberate. They are showing us enough strength to force negotiation without revealing their full capabilities. They are still hiding from us. Even now, they are protecting us, Divine Emperor. If we knew exactly how powerful they were, we might feel compelled to act against them before they could grow stronger. This way, we can negotiate in good faith without the pressure of existential fear." Thulvex laughed bitterly. They are managing our psychology, treating us like frightened children who might do something stupid if we knew the truth. With respect, Divine Emperor, they may not be wrong. Vecnel lowered his head. Our empire has survived for millennia by eliminating threats before they can grow. If we knew the full scope of human military potential, our instincts might demand a preemptive strike, a strike that would fail and doom our civilization. The Emperor rose from his throne and walked to the great windows that overlooked the capital city. Billions of Valkyrie went about their lives below, unaware of how close their empire had come to a catastrophic war, unaware that somewhere across the galaxy, a species of apparent weaklings had revealed themselves to be something far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. What do they want? Thulvex asked quietly. In the negotiations, what are their demands? Surprisingly modest, Divine Emperor. Withdrawal of all Valkyrie forces from human space. Recognition of human territorial sovereignty. Establishment of diplomatic relations and trade agreements. Release of any prisoners taken during the campaign. Vecnal consulted his notes. They have also requested something unusual. They want us to free any subject species that request independence. Thulvex turned sharply. They want us to release our conquests. Not all of them. Only those who explicitly request freedom through proper diplomatic channels. They are offering to mediate the process and provide economic support to newly independent worlds. Vecnal spread his hands. It is actually a clever arrangement. It relieves us of troublesome populations while positioning humanity as a benefactor. The freed species will be grateful to humans, not hostile to us. And what do we receive in return for this generosity? Peace, trade, the knowledge tea. Grand Admiral Vornik stood on the observation deck of the Divine Judgment, watching the human fleet through the reinforced viewing ports. 3,000 vessels held position around his battered command, their weapons dark but clearly ready. They were beautiful ships, he admitted to himself, elegant in their lethality, designed by a species that understood war at a fundamental level. The negotiations had concluded 2 hours ago. The terms were signed. The Valkyrie fleet would withdraw immediately, returning to Imperial space with their surviving vessels and personnel. Human prisoners would be released. Diplomatic relations would be established, and across the Empire, subject species who wished for freedom would be given the chance to petition for it. It was the most favorable treaty any species had ever won against the Valkyrie Empire, and the humans had achieved it without firing a single shot at his fleet. A chime at the door announced a visitor. Vornik turned to find a human officer standing at the entrance, a middle-aged male in the uniform of the Reserve Navy. He carried himself with the easy confidence of a veteran, someone who had seen combat and made peace with what it meant. Grand Admiral, the human said with a respectful nod, I'm Captain Marcus Webb, assigned as your diplomatic liaison for the withdrawal. Admiral Okonkwo asked me to check if you needed anything. Before your fleet departs, Vornik studied the human with professional interest. Your fleet will escort us to the border. A small contingent will accompany you to ensure safe passage. The rest will return to standby positions. Webb moved to stand beside Vornik at the viewing port. Standard procedure for situations like this. You have standard procedures for repelling invasion fleets. A slight smile crossed Webb's face. We have procedures for everything, Admiral. We're big believers in preparation. They stood in silence for a moment, watching the human ships drift in perfect formation. Vornik found himself compelled to ask the question that had been burning in his mind. Since the treaty was signed, why didn't you destroy us? Webb turned to look at him. I'm sorry. You had overwhelming force. You could have annihilated my entire fleet. Sent a message to the Empire that would have echoed for centuries. Vornik gestured at the vessels outside. Instead, you offered negotiation, peace, terms that cost us very little. In the grand scheme of things, why? Webb was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of personal experience. I was 19 when I first saw combat. The War of Three Empires. My ship was stationed at the defense of New Helsinki. When the Kethrai hit us with everything they had, his eyes grew distant. 12,000 civilians died in the first hour. We couldn't evacuate them fast enough, couldn't protect them. All we could do was watch and fight and try to stop the next attack. Voronek listened in silence. I spent 4 years in that war. Lost friends, lost family, lost pieces of myself that I'll never get back. Webb's jaw tightened. And when it was over, when we'd won, when the HFY homeworld was nothing but rubble, I felt empty, not victorious, not proud, just empty. Because I knew what we'd done, what we'd become, and I knew that somewhere, young HFY who'd never wanted the war were mourning their dead just like I was mourning mine. You felt sympathy for your enemies. I felt exhausted by war, by death, by the endless cycle of attack and revenge that seemed to define galactic civilization. Webb turned back to the viewport when the great stand-down happened. I was one of the first to volunteer for reserve status. I wanted to go back to a normal life, wanted to believe we could be something other than warriors. Yet you kept your skills, maintained your readiness. Because we're not fools, Webb's voice hardened slightly. We wanted peace, but we knew peace couldn't be guaranteed. So we built a system that let us sleep while keeping one eye open. We hoped we'd never need it, prayed that the galaxy would let us live quietly. He shrugged. And then your fleet arrived. Voronek thought about the humans he had encountered during this campaign. The colonial militia pilots who had fought desperately against impossible odds. The colonists on New Brisbane who had looked at him with anticipation rather than fear. The ambassador who had warned him with pity in her eyes. You were all waiting, he said slowly. Your entire civilization was waiting for someone like us to come. Not waiting, hoping we were wrong, hoping the galaxy had changed. Webb shook his head. It hadn't, so we did what we had to do. We woke up. And now you'll go back to sleep. We'll try. The ships will return to storage. The veterans will go back to their farms and classrooms and offices. We'll pretend to be peaceful again. Webb met Voronek's eyes. But we'll remember, and so will you. So will your emperor. So will everyone who learns what happened here. Voronek nodded slowly. He understood now. The humans had not spared his fleet out of weakness or naivety. They had spared it because destruction served no purpose. Because killing for 100 ships would only breed hatred and guarantee future conflict. Because the goal had never been victory, but deterrence. They wanted the galaxy to know what they were, what they could be, and then they wanted to go back to being farmers and teachers and merchants, sleeping peacefully while the universe remembered their claws. Your Admiral Okonkwo, Voronek said. She told me that war would have destroyed both our peoples. What did she mean? Webb's expression grew somber. Full mobilization changes us, Admiral. The people you fought, the militia and the first reserve wave, they're professionals, career soldiers. They can activate and deactivate without losing themselves. He paused. But the deep reserves, the civilians who would be called up for total war, they're not soldiers. They're ordinary people who would have to become something else, something harder, something colder. You fear your own people. We fear what our people can become when pushed far. Enough. Webb's voice dropped. Our history is full of examples. Times when humans decided that survival mattered more than morality. Times when we did things that still haunt our collective memory. He looked out at the fleet. Every one of those ships is crewed by people who have studied that history, who know what we're capable of at our worst, and who have sworn never to let us become that again unless there's no other choice. Voronek felt a chill run through him. He had conquered species that fought with suicidal desperation, with religious fervor, with mindless aggression. He had never encountered a species that feared its own capacity for violence. What happens if someone does push you that far? He asked. If someone gives you no choice. Webb was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Then God help them, because we won't. The words hung in the air between them. Voronek thought of the HFY homeworld, now an asteroid field. He thought of the beacon that warned travelers in every known language. He thought of a species that could destroy planets and chose instead to sleep. I think, Voronek said slowly, I am glad we chose negotiation. So are we, Admiral. So are we. The withdrawal began an hour later. 400 Valkyrie ships activated their engines and began the long journey home, escorted by a small contingent of human vessels. On the bridge of the Divine Judgment, Voronek watched Earth shrink in the rear displays until it was just another blue dot. In the infinite black, he thought about what he would tell Emperor Thulvex, about sleeping giants and hidden strength, about a species that wanted nothing more than to be left alone, but had built the means to end civilizations if denied that simple wish. He thought about the galaxy beyond Valkyrie space, full of powers who did not yet know what humanity truly was. Powers who might make the same mistake he had almost made. Powers who might push harder than he had been willing to push. And he wondered what would happen when someone finally woke the giant completely on Earth. The stand-down orders went out within hours of the Valkyrie departure. Ships that had emerged from decades of storage returned to their orbital berths. Veterans who had reported for duty said goodbye to their units and went home to families who had feared they might never see them again. The machinery of war slowly, carefully, gratefully shut itself down. In a small house in what had once been called Nebraska, Captain Marcus Webb removed his uniform for the last time in 20 years and hung it in the back of his closet. His wife found him there, staring at the fabric like it held memories he was not sure he wanted to keep. "It's over," she said quietly, "if for now." He closed the closet door. "It's over for now." They walked outside together, into a sunset that painted the prairie in shades of gold and red. Somewhere above them, the ships were returning to sleep. Somewhere across the galaxy, the Valkyrie were spreading word of what they had witnessed. And somewhere in the future, another threat might rise to challenge humanity's peaceful existence. But not today. Today, the giant could rest. Today, the claws could be sheathed. Today, humanity could be what it wanted to be. Farmers and teachers and merchants and artists, living quiet lives under a warm sun. Tomorrow might bring new dangers, new tests, new reasons to wake the sleeping strength that lay beneath their peaceful surface. But that was tomorrow's problem. Today, there was peace. And for a species that had learned to fear its own power, peace was the most precious victory of all.